Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our talks today. We're so thrilled to be joined by the wonderful William Jackson Harper to talk all about the current series of HBO Max's Love Life. And I wanted to start by talking about your character development process, where we meet him in the first episode, because your character's in this marriage that he's been in for 7 years. And so there's so much to really figure out in terms of your character and what you want that relationship dynamic to capture. It's capturing who they were when they first met each other and all the different stages that they've been through emotionally together in this partnership. And so how did you really work to finesse and figure out what you wanted that to look like? Because it comes across so rich and layered, even in the first few scenes.
Yeah, well, first off, I've known Maya for a while. Maya Zan, who plays Emily. I've known her for a little while, and I've always just been tickled by her. I think she's great. I really like her. I think she's a great performer, and I think she's a really good person. And we did talk about what it is to be in a relationship that it's not that it doesn't work, but also it doesn't work. There's nothing really wrong, but it's also not fulfilling in the way that it ought to be. And, sometimes with those relationships, it feels like you don't want to end it because there's nothing actually wrong. Like actively on the surface, it's like there's nothing actually wrong. And I feel like in a lot of ways, those relationships can be, and especially ending them can be really painful because it's you still like the person, like you actually probably still love them. It's just morphed into something different that maybe isn't fulfilling for you in a marriage anymore. And so we sort of dove into what that was, where we sort of felt like ships passing in the night. And there's certain things we just don't discuss. There's certain things about each other that we don't know because we never really talked about it, and to talk about it now might make things unpleasant. So we'd rather not, we'd rather keep things pleasant than really do some of the hard, scary work. And I feel like sometimes that can contribute to a relationship sort of just winding up being on life support a little bit.
Yeah. And
And
obviously,
yeah.
as the season progresses, we get the opportunity to see your character in potential different romantic situations, and we get to see the different sides of him that different people that he meets bring out in him. But also there's that really interesting journey in who you present yourself to be when you first meet someone. You're not going to go in and show them the worst side of yourself. You're kind of
Right.
going for that, like, these are my best qualities. And there's a real difference in the types of chemistry that you manage to create with each of your scene partners for each of the episodes. And so how did you consciously think about the way that you really wanted to create such a unique and different dynamic for your character, and really think about what each of these women bring out in him?
Well, I think that Marcus is trying to kind of rediscover who he is in a lot of ways, because I think that uh, I certainly had this idea that by the time I hit my 30s, I would be solid and know exactly what I think and who I am at all times. And that person would never change in the presence of another person. And I quickly found out that that's not true for me. And I think that it's not true for Marcus either. I think that he he's not trying, like, he's not putting on an affect necessarily, but I think he's hoping to find where he is most comfortable through relationships and through encounters with people. And so I think each person sort of wakes up a brand new side of him. And I think that, Marcus, because maybe he feels a little bit of panic, maybe he feels a little pressure to sort of land on what he is like, okay, well, this is who I am. And then, something happens which sort of makes him re-examine that. And then he has to go through that process all over again. So that's part of that sort of leaned into the different dynamics of each relationship. I think that sometimes you have to go through those. go through those phases in order to be ready for the person that you're actually supposed to be with, and go through those phases to figure out a little bit more deeply who you are the in all different scenarios. I mean, I think there's an element of sort of putting on some kind of facade for all of us when we're dealing with different people, uh, and I think that Marcus is doing that, but I think it's just in sort of this kind of strange crucible of a relationship where someone else's very like their deepest feelings are very much at stake while he's figuring all of this out.
And with that idea of rediscovery that he's going through that you're mentioning, was there a really interesting journey for you in the idea of developing this character and then deconstructing all of the different things that fall, outside of this marriage, who is he when he doesn't have a partner by his side that he's had for 7 years? What does this make him? And then everything that you were saying about these different parts of him that get awakened. So was it this idea of kind of building a character, who he was in this relationship, and then after that falls apart, really kind of like deconstructing and taking away some of the elements that you'd built?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's definitely part of it. I think that you know, I think pretty early on, Marcus starts to run from his feelings and run from the work a little bit, and just wants to, fill his time so he doesn't have to think and doesn't have to like really like drill down on who he is and why this all fell apart. I feel like that's sort of the first stop. Is like, okay, well, let me just stay busy. Let me just like just go out and do all the things and not have to call anybody and let them know I'm going to be late, or like just be completely untethered and unencumbered by the presence of a person that he has a responsibility to. Um, and then sort of starting to like when he is attracted to someone, trying to be the person that they like, not lying, not putting on something completely false, but just really leaning into those aspects that they seem to be responding to. um, and I think that also a big part of his identity, because he got married at such a young age, was being a married man. And when that's gone, it's. I mean, I've never been married, but I have been in some long-term relationships, and for the longest time, it's like everyone in your circle knows you as a part of this couple, and that you are, the two of you make a kind of whole, even if whether you're married or not. And that is a large part of your character. There's a large part of like how people view you, and when you take that away, it's like you realize that there's certain things that you didn't do the work on, you didn't really think about, and I think that it sort of leaves you in this very strange limbo for a while, where you just you wind up making some terrible decisions, and putting on different faces to see which one is the most comfortable.
Yeah. And one of the things that's really interesting to look at with all of the episodes is that you have this overall arc that Marcus is going on throughout the entire season. And yet each of the episodes could actually work as a standalone story, because there is an individual narrative arc and a journey that he's having with himself in each of them. And did you find that when you were working with the scripts that you were thinking with each individual episode of what's the growth that he needs to have in this? What's the way in which he needs to move forward? Even if it is just, okay, he's moved in with his sister and he's figuring out the day to day, or it is slightly larger leaps and slightly larger journeys that come later in the season.
Yeah, I did think about that. I think that one of the overarching things for Marcus is that at no point does he want to look like he has no idea what he's doing, and so there's a level of just sort of bucking up and trying to present. As someone who has done the growth, has kind of come through some of these things already. And so, yeah, like there is an aspect of sort of looking at each and everything, and it's like, where is he, where is he in the larger arc? And also, like, where is the cover in that smaller arc? Because I think that, we're seeing him at various points of being lost. And I think the way in which he covers being lost has to change as he starts to figure out more about who he is. And so, yeah, I definitely looked at the little arc and sort of put it in terms of the bigger thing, like, what is he covering in this episode? What is he covering in this episode? What does he think he understands in this episode that he doesn't? And what is the thing that actually from this episode and from this particular piece of the story is actually going to stay, because that is centrally who he is, and he's made that discovery now.
And because he is going on such a journey of rediscovery with himself, there's so many different almost pacing elements to that. There's moments where he's really finding a way to move forward. There's moments where he needs to just kind of sit still and allow himself to wallow and to really just sit in the experience that he's just had when he's gone through some painful moments emotionally. And so was there a journey for you in figuring out that pacing? Okay, this is when it feels like he's really moving forward and making some progress. This is a moment where we're going to kind of just like sit and be a little bit stagnant for a minute because he needs to as a character.
Yeah, the script did a lot of that work for me. We had a killer writers' room that I feel like they really understood when to sort of just pump the brakes and be like, we got to pause to just, there's no organic way for us to move on to another big shift because we have to really kind of deal with the thing that we just went through. And so, yeah, the script did a lot of that work, but I really appreciated those moments because it's, I think that dating is hard. Dating is dangerous. You can get your feelings hurt so quickly and so thoroughly. And, I feel like he gets knocked for a loop quite a bit. And it's important to see the moments where you don't get back up immediately. And you got to pepper that in with the times that you do. I feel that for me that feels truthful. There's times where you're like, oh, that stung, but I'm not gonna let that keep me down. And then there's moments where like, you know what, I just need to go ahead and let this heal over before I go back out and try to be a person. And so the writers' room did a really good job of calibrating that, and I just trusted them with it.
Yeah. And with that truthfulness as well, one of the things that I appreciate about the show is the fact that it allows itself to play with the idea of romanticism in a slightly traditional sense. And then, like you said, it also has the very realistic aspect. And, we get to see, without kind of giving away any plot points, like later in the season, we do get to see what is the actual day-to-day of being in a long-term relationship and the work that you have to do to create that type of partnership. And so did that really open up a lot of the spaces that you could take your character by getting to explore both the romanticism and the realism of what relationships mean for him?
Yeah. It's I feel like that's a big part of what he's learning. I think that, because Marcus had this idea of who he was supposed to be, I think that he wasn't true to who he was early on. And I think that when you're sort of forced to turn inward and figure some of that stuff out, there's some collateral damage that happens with other people that are around for that process. And I feel like Marcus, like he thinks he's ready. Everything that he is going through, every moment, every choice that he makes, in the moment he feels it's the right choice. Everything he says, he feels it's something that has to be said in that moment. And so, yeah, it does open up a lot of doors to sort of explain, to show ways that maybe he to show evolution of how he would be in a relationship. I mean, like at any moment the season could end. You know, at any moment with any relationship, that could be the one that keeps going on. But there's something that he has to learn from that, and you know, and I think it's important that we show that it's that sometimes that gets really thorny and messy, and people are teaching you things that you don't know that they're teaching you. They don't know that they're teaching you, um, and it's really instrumental in crafting where he is actually to know like what are the mistakes he's making in episode 3 as opposed to the mistakes he's making in episode 7, which shows you know they're very different mistakes you know over the course of those episodes.
Yeah, I also really enjoy the richness of the family dynamic that we get to explore as well, and particularly the relationship that he has with his dad, where early on he feels like his dad is always the person who's his biggest critic and there to kind of find fault even when he has successes, particularly when it comes to his professional career. And at the same time, it also feels like his dad is one of the people who's such a pivotal turning point in Marcus really understanding his own self-worth and valuing himself a little bit more. And so how did you want to really explore that trajectory where he starts to really understand and value himself professionally in a different way because of the relationship with his dad and some of the things that he says to him?
Well, I think that you know I feel like there is a like for me in the backstory of Marcus, it was like Marcus was a guy that never quite fit. You know, in whatever world he's in, he's always feels a little bit outside of it. And you know, he was never the cool guy. He was never the jock. He was never, you know, there was never anything where he felt like everyone really appreciated what he did contribute. You know, he was just a guy that, you know, did the right thing, and no one really noticed. No one really, you know, he was just a good kid, basically a good kid that everyone forgets is there. And I feel like, you know, his dad being someone who has achieved so much and is impressive to people, you know, can't quite, just doesn't understand how much his approval means to him. And I think that, you know, from his dad's standpoint, it's like, you know, he's just trying to help Marcus grow and, you know, doing the hard love thing, you know, like the tough love thing rather. And I think Marcus can't see that because there's a part of that where, you know, there's a little part of the little kid that stays in everybody, you know, and, you know, there's certain things that just trigger you and it's not really rational. And as an adult, you're still just like, someone could say something that, you know, especially someone that is close to you that hurts more and that you take in a different way than someone that you just met. And I think that, you know, if this had been if, you know, some of the tension between Marcus and his dad, I think if Marcus's dad had been just a mentor that he knew from school and was saying these things, it's different than his dad, because his dad is like, you know, at some point you're supposed to, I think Marcus's idea is that you're supposed to accept me for who I am and where I'm at. And I feel like he feels like he hasn't gotten enough of that, but he's gotten a lot of instruction and a lot of critique. And I think it's, you know, and from Marcus's dad's point of view, I think it's like he believes so firmly in Marcus and he just wants to see him really succeed at the level that he knows that he's capable of succeeding. And so it's just a miscommunication, you know, they're just missing each other. And so, you know, when we get to that point where they really do sort of get to talk a little bit more, you get to see that. And I think that, and I think Marcus is finally at a place where he's able to hear what his dad is actually getting at and what he's actually saying and what he's actually trying to do. And that's not to say that his dad is perfect. His dad is obviously flawed and not taking in where Marcus is at, but, you know, but it's all coming from a good place. And I think Marcus is finally able to see that.
Yeah. And lastly, on a slightly different note, one of the things that I appreciate that you've talked about a lot as an actor is that idea of imposter syndrome, because every single project throws you through a loop. It's completely new circumstances, a new team of people that you're working with, having to figure out what that collaboration is going to look like. But the reason that I wanted to ask you about it is because I love that you've described how, like when you were working with Barry Jenkins, that, that was one of the things that you were feeling, and that you really just channeled it into the focus with your scene partner in the moment. And so I wanted to ask about the journey and the relationship that you've had with those moments of imposter syndrome that come with every new project as an actor and is a very common thing, and how you've really figured out how to just channel it into a space where you're moving forward and you're really just focusing on, the moment with your scene partner and the energy there to kind of move forward with a lot of that.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, look, I don't know that I'm ever going to shake that. I don't know if I'm ever going to shake imposter syndrome. I think it's always going to be a part of me. But I do feel like the one thing that I can do is be a good scene partner. And that sort of blocks out all the noise more than anything else. And so like I have always come from this place of trying to make my scene partner, from an external standpoint, look as good as possible. Not really getting so wrapped up in my personal journey as much as like I want the scene to exist between the two of us, because that's where, for me as a viewer, that's where it feels like scenes really cook. When I watch someone, just one person be really great and do all this really weird idiosyncratic stuff that's like so exciting, but they're not doing anything with their scene partner and they're not really taking them in. Uh, I get frustrated as a viewer, and so I really try to, you know, be be present with the person that I'm working with and give them what they need to make some weird choices and for us to land in some unexpected places. And I think once you land in that unexpected place, that's when everyone's out of control, everyone's completely out of their comfort zone, and there's no way to let the imposter syndrome stuff take over because you're not as worried about the result. You're more invested in the process and the moment. And, even the people that are watching you are like, oh, that's new, that's different. I'm not really sure what that is. Let's toss that out and try something different, or, let's lean into that weird thing that just happened and see what we get. And then you can just sort of focus on the work a lot more that way. At least for me, I can focus on the work a lot more that way. But yeah, the imposter syndrome thing always stays, and I find it's more present when I'm really worried about the result. When I'm coming from a result-oriented place, that's when I get in trouble, because I'm like, the scene has to be this, and if I can't execute that, then it doesn't work. And I think that that energy, that imposter syndrome stuff dies when I let go of the idea of the scene and the idea of the piece, and just sort of lean into the truth of the moment and just see what happens.
Yeah. Really, really appreciate you sharing all of that. And congratulations on everything with Love Life. Thank you so much, William.
No, thank you.